So you've clicked on the video because the thumbnail says, "I almost died." And you think to yourself, there's no way this is real. It has to be clickbait. It's not. For context, I'm a third-year university student, and in my second year, I lived off campus and somehow ended up with a really awful landlord, despite being so vigilant when looking for accommodation. But before we get into it, let me talk about what I'm drawing in the background. This is a poster for my webcomic, Late Spring, Early Summer, this year. 2025, that is. In a world where only 1% of the population is born with special powers called keys, distressing things start to happen to Rose Kingley when her mentor dies. This sets into motion a dangerous chain of events which will change Rose's life forever. So, if this sounds like your thing, consider following me on my socials. Links are in the description. Now, before we get into the actual stories, maybe I should correct myself. I didn't get a singular landlord. The guy who owned the house was halfway up the country and gave all responsibilities of the house to the local property shop. This property shop is infamous for being the worst. And the one piece of advice older years gave to freshers is never to go through this property shop. Me and my friends heeded their advice and went through the university-owned shop. So imagine my surprise when I get an email saying, "Lead tenant, please contact Hellscape Property Company to arrange picking up your key." What? What do you mean? Worst part of this is, we ended up contacting the university shop like 3 months into living in the house, and apparently they had no idea the house was even listed on another website and not even being run by the actual landlord. So we just got screwed over massively. On to why the house was hell. For the first 2 months, we had no Wi-Fi, which we were less pressed about until our classes actually started and we couldn't do our work from home. The property shop didn't even believe us. They told us to buy Wi-Fi extenders, which we did, and to reset the box, which we did numerous times. We kept reporting this pretty much every week, by the way, and every time they came out, they tested something and were like, "Yeah, you've got Wi-Fi, it just doesn't extend very far." Bro, like, I lived in the room with the box in it, and the Ethernet didn't even work. I think about another month went by, and we reported it again. This time I physically had to show them that we had no internet connection on our phones. I couldn't even load a simple Google web page on my phone. Suddenly they believed us, and they sent a former Virgin employee over, which was now working for them. Guess what? He spent 30 seconds in our house before telling us there was no bandwidth in the house. Our Wi-Fi box was dead. 3 months they kept telling us the previous tenants didn't have an issue with this. They did, by the way. We accidentally found the previous tenants because we just happened to work with them. They did complain. They just ended up giving up because it was too exhausting. And while it was great because we suddenly had working Wi-Fi, the issue of it not extending too far arose. Luckily, we had already brought Wi-Fi extenders and they worked like half the time, so at least we had Wi-Fi so that we could work at home. So, on to the nearly dying thing. Let me set the scene. It's 3 p.m. on a Sunday. Our alarm goes off. The fire alarm in the house was kind of sensitive. Some of my housemates liked burning the bacon for the crisp, so sometimes our alarm would go off. We could turn it off manually, so it wasn't really a big deal. We just liked to jokingly shame people whenever it went off. I lived in a downstairs room, so I was one of the first people to walk into the room. One of my housemates was already in the living room vaping outside and was just like, it just started to go off. So we assumed it's probably running out of batteries. But as I go to turn off the fire alarm, I notice that it's not the fire alarm. And that confuses both of us because what other alarm would be going off? We don't recognize that. So I just followed the sound and it led to the boiler. It was our carbon monoxide alarm. Our carbon monoxide alarm was going off. For those who don't know, carbon monoxide alarms are designed to warn you of any unusual buildup of carbon monoxide in your home, and it only usually goes off when it's at levels that are dangerous to human beings. So the fact that ours was going off meant that we had to get out of the house. I wrangled my housemates and got them out of the house, and we spent a good 15 minutes out the front of our house, alarm going off, debating what we should do. It was a Sunday, so the property shop was closed, so we couldn't inform them of the situation. So we ended up just Googling what we should do and found a national gas company who could help us. We called them, then headed to the back garden after they told us that they'd be there as soon as possible. During this time, the alarm had actually gone off because we had all the doors open, so any of the carbon monoxide that could have been in the air should have been diluted, if that's the right word. So 20 minutes later, the gas guy knocks on our door and comes to help us. Now this man was the sweetest man ever. We had said on the phone that we were university students, so he must have been informed, but he was telling us exactly what he was doing to put us at ease. He ended up testing the boiler and deemed it to be unsafe with the amount of carbon monoxide around it, so he ended up capping our gas to prevent any possible further leakage. He gave us the report to give to our landlord and went on his merry way. Monday rolls around, and we give the report to the property shop, which you should never do. Don't ever do that. Always keep the original document given to you and give a photocopied version to the landlord. That way you have the original document if you have to file a complaint against your landlord or maybe go to court. We didn't do that. Learn from our mistakes. Anyway, a few hours later, they came to check the boiler, but the guy couldn't figure out where the gas leak was coming from. He obviously knew something was wrong because the alarm had gone off and we actually had proof that our gas was capped. So he just kept poking and prodding around for a while. He asked if he could go smoke, and I was like, sure. I have 2 housemates who smokes, and he went outside, and then he stopped. He called over his brother, and the two discussed something before they turned to me and said, has your flue chute always been pointing towards your kitchen window? Because it's not supposed to do that. The flue chute that comes out of the boiler, that safely removes carbon monoxide from your house, was pointing at our kitchen window for months! It was like that when we moved in, so God knows how that managed to slip past the safety checks, but apparently it did. And we were pissed. I think this rattled me a lot more than some of my other housemates because I lived on the bottom floor, 20 yards from the kitchen window and boiler, and I also have asthma. So if the alarm had been faulty, which I personally requested them to check because it was unchecked on our inventory when we first moved in, then I, along with another housemate who was also living on the bottom floor, genuinely might have gotten carbon monoxide poisoning. And I know for a fact that I wouldn't have gone to get my symptoms checked because I would have just assumed it was my mental health declining. Because damn, my mental health was declining last year. On top of this, we had a screaming fridge that despite having 2 doors in between my bedroom and the kitchen, I could still hear. It was just groaning all the time. It was like it had a microphone inside its wires and a speaker directly into our heads. It was constantly overstimulating all of us. Like, we couldn't do more than 2 things in the kitchen living room area. It's like the triangle that you see every time. You can have 2, but not all 3. You can have the screaming fridge, TV on, or talking, but you're not allowed to have all 3 of them. Only 2. On top of that, one of our housemates ended up living on the sofa because they had bugs in their room, and the property shop just didn't believe them. Like, those bugs everywhere. I literally swore to myself I'd never go into that room because it was so many in there. And all of this happened in the first 4 months of us living in that place. And I'm sure there's so many more issues that happened in that house that I can't even remember because I genuinely went into a functioning freeze halfway through my 2nd year because I was so stressed. And that's been my hellish landlord stories. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you still feel clickbaited, I apologize, but to me, I did almost die, so you know, I get to clickbait my trauma, I guess.